all, and welcome to Neurohumanities 101. My name is Farron McEntee, and I am Associate Director and Senior Fellow with the Dana Foundation Career Network in Neuroscience and Society. And I am so delighted to be joined here today by members of the Neurohumanities Network who are going to be participating on a panel on Neurohumanities 101. So here with us today, we have Mattia Rosso, Tatiana Greige, and Cori Polonski. And so I'm going to toss to Mattia, and he will get us started.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and we're so excited to tell you something about the Neurohumanities. This will be Neurohumanities 101 with the Neurohumanities Network. And again, thank you to the Dana Foundation for having us. And this is who we are. We'll talk more about our group, but here are some of the links to where you can find us. So today we are going to try to allow you to understand the opportunities for original work and scholarship in this growing transdisciplinary field, which is the neurohumanities. We're also going to learn about the practical applications of the neurohumanities, both in clinic, in neurology training, and in the community. And then we are going to reflect together and envision the first steps you can take to get involved with the neurohumanities, and then we're going to have the opportunity to answer all of your questions. Next, we should go around the room. I'll start with myself. My name is Mattia Rosso, and I am a Movement Disorders Fellow at Yale School of Medicine and one of the co-founder of the Neurohumanities Network. I think Galina Gheihman is not here quite yet, so I think I can pass the mic to Tatiana Greige for her introduction to herself.
Thanks, Mattia. Hi, everyone. My name is Tatiana. I am a vascular neurologist and a neurohospitalist in Maine Medical Center in Portland. I trained in Boston, where I did also my fellowship at Mass General. I'm very excited to be here. And I'll just
We have
have
Cori
Cori.
Polonski.
Hi, I'm Cori, also really excited to be here. I trained with Mattia actually in South Carolina, and then I did neuroimmunology fellowship in Utah, and I'm a neurohospitalist at UPMC in Pittsburgh right now, and one of the APDs there.
Wonderful. And Galina Gheihman will be coming in a moment, but she's another one of the co-founders of the network, as well as a neurologist at Brigham and Women's and Mass Gen. So to start us off, let's talk about neurohumanities as a growing scholarly field, and I'm hoping that we can give you enough examples to reflect on how you yourself could be engaged in this field. The first question we should ask ourselves is, what are the neurohumanities? And I like to think of it as the intersection between the arts, the humanities, and neuroscience. But as you can imagine, that cross-section is quite big. You can imagine that there are a myriad of ways in which you could frame this intersection. So I think it's helpful to think of it as a spectrum, one that goes from the empirical on the one side to the more purely humanistic on the other. So if we zoom into the empirical side of things, we might see how neuroscience can be used as a tool for analyzing the arts and the humanities. So here you might find fields like neuroaesthetics, which use tools from neuroscience to reframe the field of aesthetics, which, for your own reference, is the study of how beauty comes along in art. So what neuroaesthetics does is that it thinks about how the artistic experience starts within the brain as a sensory and motor reaction, and then these percepts get bundled into emotions and valuation to then be included in the preconceived knowledge of the person to create meaning making. And the appeal of this field is that you can frame this as a series of hypotheses that can then test with the tools of neuroscience. So on the other side of the spectrum is where you are going to see the humanities. You might see the pure humanities, and this is where you could find efforts such
I didn't
as
get that. Could you try again?
No,
I didn't get that. Sorry, FaceTime hasn't added support for that with Siri.
hold on. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because for some reason my Siri started playing. All right. So we were talking about the empirical side of things. On the opposite side, we might find the pure humanistic approach to the neurohumanities. Here is where we might find arts and humanities reflecting on the lived experience. And an important example of this is the work of one artist by the name of Barbara Salzberg Matthews. She's both a painter as well as a mime, and also is a person with Parkinson's disease. And she uses her talent in the arts to share with us what the experience of having Parkinson's really feels like. And next, we have another side of the more purely artistic neurohumanities, where we might see arts and humanities being used to reflect on the insights that come from the neurosciences. And here I would like to spotlight the work of Serena Scapagnini, who's a multimedia artist who paints and makes these wonderful artistic creations to communicate with us what memories are, both at the biological, quantum, neurological, and societal level. Let's zoom into the empiric neurohumanities a bit more. We have already talked about the field of neurostatics, and another way to get engaged in this kind of scholarship is through the neuroscientific study of language, music, and emotion. And here I would like to showcase the work of Konstantina Theophanopoulou, who's both a neuroscientist and a flamenco dancer, and her line of research focuses on the effects of dance on the brain. And one example of her scholarship is in this paper where she used mobile brain imaging to study the brains and the activity in the brains of dancers of a specific tradition, the tradition of the Buto dancing, and taking us from the rehearsals to the public performance phases. And then other groups have used neuroscience to study what goes on during moral decision making. And there is this provocative viewpoint by Claire Kelly and Redmond O'Connell asking whether neuroscience can change the way we view morality. And the next part that I would like to showcase is the study of cultural memory. And this is a fascinating example of how neuroscience is reaching toward the neurohumanities or the humanities in very much a two-way street kind of partnership. And in the work of Yadin Dudai, the author is looking into how memories exist not just within brains or within cells or within brain networks, but as binders in our own cultures. And let's now talk a little bit more in detail about possibility for scholarship and art, where we use art and the humanities as a way to reflect on the lived experience. And I've already showcased the work of Barbara Salzberg Matthews, which I encourage all of you to take a look at. The next artist that I would like to discuss is Priya Rama. Priya is a Cincinnati-based painter and also a person with migraines. And she uses her abstract art, and you might see some instances of her art right here, to express the pain that goes on during a migraine attack. And the last artist I would like to showcase today is Leslie Newell, who is a Maine-born and New Hampshire residing artist and person with Parkinson's disease. And she has a specific bond and a passion for the beaches of Maine. And she makes her art out of shells and driftwood that she finds in the beaches of Maine. And she creates these wonderful works of art. And if it sounds like I've talked a lot about Parkinson's disease, it's probably because I'm a movement fellow, but also there is a fascinating connection between Parkinson's disease and increased creativity. And there is this very interesting and insightful viewpoint by 4 neurologists that are looking into whether art can be used as a drug. And I encourage you to take a look at this viewpoint, which is yet another example of scholarship within the neurohumanities. And now for a few words on art that reflects on the neurosciences. We've already talked about Serena Scapagnini's work, and here I would like to show you another one of her artworks called Ether that shows how multimedia art can take us further than how much words can be used to describe the effect and the role of memories. Speaking of memories, there is a fascinating six-part album made by the musician The Caretaker called Everywhere at the End of Time, where the artist uses each individual album as a way to express a different phase of Alzheimer's disease. And as the music itself degenerates, that is used as a metaphor for the degeneration that takes place within the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease. And speaking of memory, I would be remiss not to mention the very popular film by Christopher Nolan, Memento. And the reason why I'm reflecting on this film is that this film would not have been possible without the knowledge and the insights that come from neurology and the neurosciences. There are also ways in which we can apply the neurohumanities to either pedagogy, through narrative medicine, museum-based interventions, as well as applications that are more therapeutic with cinema therapy, art therapy, and music therapy. But my colleagues will tell you much more about all of this. And if you liked what you heard here, you want to hear more about this intersectional field, you're in luck. We are part of the Neurohumanities Network. We have monthly virtual seminars and booster sessions. We also have a YouTube channel that serves as our lecture archive. We have a social media presence. We also have a newsletter and a website. And here are some QR codes for you to find. Here's a wonderful picture of our website. And without further ado, I'm excited to leave you in great hands with my friend and colleague, Galina Gheihman.
Well, thank you so much, Mattia, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Galina Gheihman, and I apologize that I was a little bit late to the show, but just in time for my section or segment. And as you can see, hopefully today, we're really just trying to whet your appetite for some of the opportunities and possibilities for neurohumanities. And I was tasked with discussing neurohumanities applied in the clinic, and I'm calling from clinic, so I guess I'm in the right setting to share with you how I've been able to get involved with bringing arts and humanities to my practice as a neurologist. And interestingly enough, I've been engaged in art as a person myself for many years, doing art and dance growing up. But I never really thought about bridging the two together and bringing it directly into my clinical work as a neurologist. But fortunately, the opportunity found me. So about 2 years ago, I was asked by a colleague who runs the neuro recovery clinic here at Mass General Hospital where I work, if I would help him engage in a new and creative opportunity. He was approached by a former patient who was an artist, and she had the interest in helping other patients recover after neurological injury. And she gave him a little pot of money and said, you can do whatever you want with it. I won't be specific, but it's got to be about bringing art to your patients. And so he got this pot of money with that little, specification, and with that directive approached me. And the two of us started to think together about what role might art have in neurological injury. And we often think about recovery after neurological injury as an improvement in some kind of physical domain that we can measure, right? Is the arm moving better after a stroke? Is the speech being more fluent after that stroke or something else? But as we started to talk with patients, we realized that there was so much more of a humanistic element to recovery. It was getting back to the person that I was. It was a process of evolution. You may not be returning to who you are, but you were evolving. And it was really about recovering what had been taken away from you. And what we realized was that although in medicine we could offer a lot to palliate, sometimes to cure, we weren't offering a lot for patients to heal. And that was potentially where art could play a role. Next slide. So we thought about a new vision for an Art of Recovery Day. It was our first conference where we would bring together a caring, engaged community of patients, families, providers, and researchers interested in changing the way we think about neurological recovery, because we realized we don't have the answers, but maybe as a community we could create them together. And we really wanted to understand this new definition of recovery and resilience, and quite frankly, healing after neurological injury. And we thought, what better way to do it than to engage in art together and use art to help us get to the next step. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what this Art of Recovery Day looked like, which was my first instance of really bringing art into the clinical work that I do. And I'll let you know that the short story or the short answer here is that once you do it once, you can't stop. So this was my beginning, and from then we've evolved. So next slide. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Art of Recovery Day, which we launched in August of 24. So this is almost a year ago, a little bit over a year ago now. And in the next slide, you'll see that the agenda for the day was really purposefully built to give those who participated an experience. Mattia, next slide, if you can, where we had a welcome, but then we jumped right into arts-based workshops. We had everyone work together to engage in art, patients and providers. Once they were done with that experience, they flipped and they had a chance to do some adaptive dance. And then we brought people together to have a large group discussion facilitated by a graphic artist, where we talked about and dreamed about a future for neurorecovery together. So I'll have you go to the next slide, and there's actually a couple of photos to give you a sense of what this looked like. We were prompted to reflect on what made us happy. We drew that, we shared with one another. And believe it or not, some of these individuals are patients living with neurological injury. Some of them are providers who care for these patients, speech language pathologists, psychologists. My friend at the bottom in the brown shirt is Usama Khanna, ICU neurologist, who actually gave a lecture for us at the Neurohumanities about his art. And really it was a day to explore different sides of oneself. If you go to the next slide, I feel like a video is worth much more than anything I can say. So I have a short 1-minute video about the event. We can't hear it. Tia. Maybe if you unmute on your end, I don't know if that's needed.
Let's see now.
My son had a stroke over 2 years ago.
Yeah, can you start it again just to be safe?
Yeah.
Thank you.
My son had a stroke a little over 2 years ago. When you go through a trauma like that, you feel like you're very alone. And when you come into a group like this, you recognize there is a community of people who have experienced trauma and are resilient and growing out of that trauma to be even better than they were before.
It's skipping a little. I don't think we hear the volume, but it's okay. It gives you guys an idea. That's Anna leading our dance group.
It was a wonderful day. It minimized my limitations. It just edified me and inspired me so much.
All right, thank you. So it was a big group that brought us together and brought art into the clinic and into our clinical spaces for the first time. But something happened that day, and it inspired us to realize that we could be offering more to our patients than the medications we were doing here, than the imaging we were doing. That in addition to that, we could offer other types of therapies to bring them back to really experiencing their full selves as people. And so 2 programs led out of that, perhaps influenced by the day. But one option that came up was we realized that dance had a real powerful role in our department. And together with students at the medical school, Harvard Medical School, where I teach, we launched a Dance for Parkinson's chapter from the National Dance for Parkinson's Association. So we now have a Dance for Parkinson's virtual dance class, which happens twice a month. It's on Zoom. You can join if you're interested to check it out. Let me know. It's offered for free for our patients, and it really introduces movement as medicine, both to improve the movement of our patients recovering or living with Parkinson's, as well as an opportunity for them to meet in community. In addition to that, I was approached by students who wanted to develop an art workshop and continue the experience they had working with our patients at the Day for Recovery into another continuing longitudinal program. We worked with the same artist, Sherry Kennedy, who fell in love in working with us in neurology and returns to work with us every other month in an Art for Neurorecovery workshop. Again, it's also online, and the reason for that choice was to really make it accessible to anyone, and it offers an adaptive arts class. So Mattia, if you go to the next slide, you'll see that a prompt is offered, and then individuals will interpret that in whatever way they want to, and we'll use a variety of materials. We send them in an art kit, which has both painting as well as clay for those who maybe have difficulty with the paintbrushes, and lots of opportunities to adapt the art and engage in it, and then create spaces where they can talk with one another about what the recovery process is like. You go to the next slide. Here's some early data from our art workshops. Our participants are coming from across 5 states. We're reaching a wide audience with this virtual option. Many are returning and having increases in some of both their motor activity as well as their perceived sense of well-being, recovery, and motivation to engage in rehabilitative care. And as you can see, there's a lot that we're hitting on, not just the working of, the engagement of your new motor strength or your cognition or your planning, but also really a sense of identity and expression. And in the next slide, here's some testimonials. Again, video is better and words of our participants are better still, but feeling connected, feeling a calming space, being able to see what others make, and really creating a chance to be me. So many of our patients with neurological conditions lose what they feel is themselves, and art can be a place for them to regain that through a different means. So with that, I'll just close by really hoping that as you see this, you leave yourself asking, what else is possible? What else is possible that we haven't thought of, that we have the duty and the opportunity to offer to our patients, and help not just to really treat, but to help them heal as they experience a new sense of self and develop a new sense of self and living with their neurological conditions. That's it. Thank you. I'll pass it on to the highly gifted Tatiana Greige.
Thank you so much, Galina. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. So I'm excited to be here with all of you and talk more about the neurohumanities in medical education. So next slide. So in medical school and residency training, we spend so much time learning the what of medicine, what the lesion is, what the imaging shows, what the diagnosis is. But the practice of caring for people with neurological illness requires something a bit different, something that's maybe harder to measure. And this ability to observe closely, to listen beyond the surface, and really be able to deal with the uncertainty with patience and compassion. So that's where the neurohumanities enter. During my residency training, I had heard about how visual arts training and humanities can improve observational skills, communication, and empathy. There were multiple studies confirming this among medical students, but also residents in ophthalmology, nuclear medicine, dermatology. But then I realized that there weren't that many studies examining the benefits of visual arts in neurology. And that's when I decided as a trainee to create the MaineHealth project. So let me tell you more about the MaineHealth project. It stands for Museum Art in Neurology Education Training, and it's a collaboration between the neurology residency at Boston University Medical Center and the curators at the Harvard Art Museums. So for the past 4 years, our residents there have been coming to the museum for a series of these custom designed art observation sessions. And these sessions were created specifically for them. Each visit focused on a different theme. So we explored the theme of power, ambiguity, improvisation, and even work-life balance. These are themes that show up in medicine every day, but that we often don't really have any structured time to reflect on. Next slide. So one of the most powerful entry points into neurohumanities education is actually visual thinking strategies, or VTS. So VTS is the most widely cited arts-based method used in medical education. There are 3 central questions that are used to guide the conversation. Number 1, what is going on in this image? Number 2, what do you see that makes you say that? This question prompts evidence-based reasoning. And then finally, number 3, what more can we find? This question encourages deeper observation and multiple perspectives. So those are the 3 questions. That's it. They're simple, but very powerful. In visual thinking strategies, there are really no right or wrong answers. The goal isn't to arrive at a single correct interpretation. It's really to explore how we each see a painting or an artwork or a patient. Next slide. And so the museum environment helps enormously. It's really informal, it's less hierarchical, and it gives residents a kind of freedom they don't really feel in the hospital. There's no pressure to impress the attending, no sense that you have to perform, no pager going off. Instead, it's going to be a space where reflective, even philosophical conversations feel possible. And it's really been extraordinary to watch the residents in that setting. They observe carefully, they share what they notice, they explain their reasoning, they listen, and they truly listen to their colleagues' perspective. Sometimes they reinforce their own interpretations, other times they'll revise them or rethink them entirely. We'll have someone spot a tiny detail no one else noticed. Someone else will offer an interpretation that, surprised the whole group. So session after session, you'll see this transformation happen. Residents are grounding their interpretations in evidence rather than assumption. They're slowing down before jumping to conclusions. They're becoming a bit more deliberate and more curious, more comfortable with also the uncertainty. And perhaps, I think most importantly, they're listening to each other, not to argue, not to correct, but also just to understand their point of view. Next slide. So does it work? Does art actually improve observational skills? So not surprisingly, it is a truly powerful tool to improve diagnostic and observational skills. When we did the MaineHealth project, we used an objective tool to kind of quantify and measure the improvement in observational skills throughout the academic year. And as you can see here, observational skills improved significantly throughout the academic year between the pre-intervention and the post-intervention tests. And this was seen when just focusing on all the images that were used during the sessions, when we were focusing on clinical imagery or art imagery. Next session. But the MaineHealth is one model, but that's just the beginning, and neurohumanities in medical education can take many forms. As part of our Neurohumanities Network seminars, we had invited Drs. Tamara Kaplan and Christine Bentley from Harvard Medical School to talk about their innovative curriculum incorporating arts in neurology education. This is another way to integrate neurohumanities in medical education. Neurology and neuroscience are often perceived as these very difficult disciplines in medicine. And so Drs. Kaplan and Dr. Bentley created educational games integrating visual arts, making learning neuroscience more fun, more interactive, and much more engaging. Next slide. And then one of the things our neurology residents face every single day is uncertainty. They're confronted with these complex, challenging cases. And sometimes, a scan doesn't look the way you would have expected it to, or a patient's symptom doesn't really evolve the way the textbook predicted. So, of course, it's natural for residents to want clear-cut answers. We all do. But in reality and in real clinical practice, those answers are often not readily available. So arts and neurohumanities can actually help with this notion of ambiguity. The ability to sit with this ambiguity and be comfortable with it is such a crucial skill in medicine. And we know from literature that doctors and physicians who have a low tolerance for this ambiguity are actually more likely to experience burnout. They're more likely to feel higher work-related stress. They're more likely to overuse diagnostic testing or referrals because they want that certainty. And we even see it affect how clinicians approach end-of-life care and end-of-life discussions. So this is not a small or abstract issue. It's very practical, and ambiguity is such a human kind of feeling. This is where art and the neurohumanities more broadly will offer something medicine can just teach on its own. Art will challenge that desire for quick answers. It slows us down. It allows and invites multiple interpretations. It really requires people to embrace uncertainty without immediately resolving it. And as an example, the one we used with the residents during the MaineHealth project was Henri Matisse's jazz work. So Matisse likely chose the word jazz for the title of his artwork because of this improvisational, dynamic nature of the work. He had these cutouts that are bold, they're spontaneous, they're vibrant, they're almost rhythmic. And they don't give you a single right interpretation. When you look at this artwork, and I encourage you to do so if you have them in your local museums, you have to sit with them, you have to move around them, you have to let them kind of shift under your gaze. And in many ways, that mirrors the experience of caring for neurological patients. The complexity, the unpredictability, the need to make meaning when you don't have all the information. So when we use jazz as a way to explore ambiguity, we asked our residents to look closely to describe what they saw and to notice how their interpretations changed and to acknowledge as well what they didn't know. And it really kind of emerged this recognition that the ability to be comfortable with ambiguity is not a personal trait. It's not something that you're born with. It's really a skill that can be practiced, that can be strengthened, and that can be rehearsed. And it's definitely a skill that I feel our neurology residents learn every day, both at the bedside, but also in these sessions through the lens of art. Next slide. And I kind of want to finish off with using art as a way to kind of confront implicit bias. One of the most powerful roles of art in medical education is its ability to surface and safely confront our implicit biases. A few years ago, you may be aware of this. There was a study of medical students and residents in 2016 that shook many of us because it revealed not only outdated misconceptions, but something that was far more troubling. There was a significant number of trainees. In that study particularly, it was up to 50% of those that were surveyed that still believed that Black patients feel less pain, that they have thicker skin, or that they possess biological differences that simply do not exist. These beliefs were not remnants of a distant past. They were very much alive in the minds of people training to become physicians. Which was more concerning was that these false beliefs directly affected their clinical decisions, and these trainees were more likely, or I apologize, they were less likely to treat their Black patients' pain appropriately. When we teach with artworks, we can also see how quickly similar patterns actually emerge. For example, when you take a look at this artwork right here, this is by Ebony G. Patterson's Three Kings Weep. The work presents three young Black men crying, and they look vulnerable. Yet, when we show this to trainees, and we were asked them to describe what they saw, they initially described these figures as defiant, angry, or challenging, even though the tears were literally right there, visible to the eye, but they still went unnoticed. The emotional reading was completely misinterpreted, and the vulnerability was misread as a threat, and their sorrow was used as aggression. What art does in this moment is truly extraordinary. It allowed to externalize bias in a way that was non-threatening, but that was undeniable. Trainees at the time began to realize that if they can misread a portrait in a gallery, they can definitely misread a patient who's in pain. And by discussing these responses collectively without blame, but just with curiosity, students began to understand how perception is constructed, how quickly it can be distorted, and how essential it is to deliberately cultivate a much more attentive and human clinical gaze. Next slide. And so my take-home messages are that humanities are important in medical training. Art can develop observational skills, foster their empathy and humanity, and provide residents with a safe space for self-reflection and offer them time to slow down. Neurohumanities will contribute to the development of well-rounded physicians with the capacity to be both skilled clinicians but also compassionate healers. And arts-based educational experiences are feasible, they're engaging, and then they can be adapted across different programs. Thank you. And now I'll give it to Cori.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tatiana. That's wonderful. So I appreciate everything that Mattia, Galina, and Tatiana have talked to you about today too. My portion is talking about a little bit of my journey of creating a Neurohumanities chapter at my local institution, and just hopefully some practical tips. And yeah, if you want to press one more time to Mattia, I can't do any of this without a huge shout out to Dorothy, who's one of the medical students that worked with me. And really I hope that you take away from this that she was a huge part of this, and at any level, you can have a huge impact in this and help create this whenever it's something that you're interested in too. So if you'll go to next slide, first, I'll also give a shout out to the three on here who are part of this paper. where I'll just mention that there's been quite a bit of look into adding in humanities and training. I think medical humanities programs have certainly been a large part of adding into educational programs like at medical schools, as well as in residency programs. And then there has been quite a bit of looking at how the neurohumanities are being integrated into training specifically within the realms of a residency program. If you want to press to the next slide, and then just press one more time too, if that's all right. Thank you. So we'll talk a little bit about, though, how to start something like a neurohumanities club. I'll tell you my story. So basically, I had started off with, got interested in this kind of an area when Mattia and Charlie went, who are both part of the Neurohumanities Network, were in my residency and had started a club with us, with the residents there. And it was an after hours thing that we could just show up when we wanted to. It wasn't a required thing. But it really piqued my interest into all of these conversations that I feel like we didn't have the time to talk about when we're in clinics, when in the normal day-to-day life of residency, in terms of what is it actually like for a patient to have the experience that they're having? What is it that they're really experiencing? Even that kind of difficult topic of how to, when a patient brings a story that they want to talk about and you need to ask them the questions that you need to get through your checklist, how do you deal with that sort of? And then also all of the parts of neurology that I think bring people into it in terms of how your brain perceives things around you. So when I came here, I really wanted to talk with people about that and get a better idea of what do other people think about it, learn from each other and figure out ways of keeping alive. What I was saying to Dorothy was that I really wanted to keep alive the wonder in residency and keep alive people's idea of what they love about neurology and stay connected to that. So the first part was gauging interest of, is anyone else thinking about these things? And I think that's the fun part to start thinking about, wherever you're at in your training or wherever you're at in your career. Are there people around me who are also asking similar questions and interested in similar things that I am? And I'd encourage you to think about that from whatever level they're at. So some of the people in our group are attendings like myself. Some people are residents. Some are medical students. We have an undergraduate. We have one of our clinical pharmacists who just is interested in neurology. So it's really just trying to get the word out there and figuring out who's interested. And if you'll press next. The next one, after you have a group together, I think is really recognizing the strengths and the interests of the people within your group. So the medical student that I was working with is really wonderful at brainstorming new ideas of novel things that we can think about. One of the residents was really great about coming up with topics for different meetings that we could do, or future book lists, or movies that we might want to do. Some people are more skilled at getting a group together and being kind of the MC of the group. And so I think it's really important to think about who's in this group and what are some strengths. And then also, I think Mattia brings up a really good point of how the neurohumanities is a big umbrella term, right? So people might be coming in with completely different interests. Some people are I have one student who's in our group who just loves the cinema part of it. And then we have some people who are really into the philosophy aspect of really diving into what each of the words mean and what our words mean that we use them. And so I think it's really cool to have all of those, but it's important to know what people are interested in so that you can kind of be fluid in what you talk about too. And then this one was important too, setting regular meeting times and locations. And so at first I was thinking, I want to have it 3 or 4 times a year and maybe just have a few events every once in a while. And when I talked with the group, they were saying, we really should meet at a reasonable, similar time once a month. And we decided on one specific location unless we had for a conversation, unless we had specific topics and specific activities that we were doing at other sites, so that people could know that there was a reliable site that you were going to be meeting at a reasonable, similar time. And they came to expect that every month you would be doing this. A really big thing I want to point out of this is it's important to keep going, even if it's 2 or 3 of you there. I think I remember talking with Galina about this early on, about how do I grow this group? How do I get more people involved? And she was saying, it's wonderful that people are interested, and that people are excited. And so I think that's where a lot of these things fall apart, is that it ends up being you and 1 or 2 other people. And you think, okay, I guess this didn't work out, but it's wonderful that anyone's interested and excited. And I think continuing to meet, even if it's times where, oh, maybe, last month it was 4 of us and we had a wonderful conversation, the 4 of us, and it was still really great. And there are months where it's quite a bit more. And so I think that's something that I'd encourage you to just continue, if it's something that's important to you, to continue doing, even if it's feels like it kind of waxes and wanes with participation. Figuring out which communication methods work best. We're still doing this, but it's interesting because at first it was more formal, like emailing back and forth, and we've now transitioned over more towards WhatsApp, where it's a lot easier to just text and say, hey, who's free this time? And kind of going through that, I think, can be a little easier. So it's going to differ from people to people, but sometimes it's easier to do these more quicker form communication rather than sometimes people aren't as good about answering emails with polls about what time can you meet, rather than they can just like a message and say that they're interested in meeting. So I think trying to figure that out is a good way of doing it as well. Having pre-reading or previewing activities. The caveat I'll say with this is it's important to have something that you plan to talk about if it's an event that you're not all doing an activity together, but that it's just you coming down and sitting and talking, but not have it too long. Or if it's long, having it over a reasonable time frame. So we did have a book that we read, but we did it over the course of 3 months, and we would just meet for the first third, for the second third, for the end. That, to be honest, some people didn't end up doing all of it. And so one thing I've had luck with is taking snippets of, here's a passage that I found interesting, or a poem I really liked, or here's a YouTube video that kind of summarizes up some themes that we talk about in this book. And then you can at least watch that and we can talk together. Or one of the times I had everyone over to my place and we watched The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. And so you can watch something together if you plan to do that too. It is helpful to have some sort of a topic and a theme that you're planning to talk about, but having it be a reasonable amount, I think, is a good idea. And then regularly asking for feedback and additional ideas. I think one of the things that has been nice is that I have come into this without any expectation of what it would look like. And I've been really pleasantly surprised, and really, it's been wonderful to get feedback from the group. I think it gives everyone buy-in to be able to feel like they're helping to shape it. And it also helps you come up with some really wonderful ideas that I wouldn't have come up with on my own. And then the next slide. Oh, it said it twice, I'm sorry. But here's some ideas for events here. These are 3 different places in Pittsburgh that we are planning to go to. The one on the left is our beloved local movie theater that's right down the street from me, where they did, we went recently, they had a surrealism week. So we went and saw a surrealist movie together. So these are some things that kind of groups can do together that I think are really fun. So if there's a movie out in the theaters that you all meet up and go to, and then sit down and just talk about it too. I think it's really fun to experientially do that. The one on the far right is the Carnegie Museum of Art that actually Galina is going to be coming down and meeting with us too, and going there as well. And so we're excited to do that. And then in the bottom is the Pittsburgh Zen Center. And so we're going next month to do a meditation and they're going to give us a little talk on neuroscience of meditation as well. So thinking of some things like that is a great idea. And for some reason, all of my titles came out double. Well, anyways, basically what I meant to say was just look out for support that is nearby or nationally. And so some of the things that I've done have been able to partner with different programs. So the Gold Humanism Honor Society at University of Pittsburgh, I met with the director there, and that's a really great place to talk with them, see what resources they have. And they were also really good about advertising our club to the residents, to the medical students who are involved in that society. And they're really good for coming up with ideas of, are there grants involved that can help you do certain things if you're interested in, say, you're interested in doing a research project of some sort, or you're interested in some sort of an offering, that you can try to get grants from that. The humanities section of the Neurology Journal is a really great place to find if you want to see, is there a poem that has to do with neurology? There are tons of things that inspire you from there that I think are really good spots to work off to have just topics that you can talk about. And it's a good place to, if you're interested in trying to get some of your work published or write with somebody about it, that's a great place to do that. And then certainly wish to plug the Neurohumanities Network, which has been wonderful, because one of the things that's great is if you have a group and you say, let's all meet up and watch a lecture together, right? Then it's less work that people have to do ahead of time, and it's something that you can all do together and is going to be regularly doing it. So those are all of mine. Thank you, guys.